Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock on Tuesday, March 26th. We're at the CALLERLAB convention in Cary, North Carolina. And the session that we're about to present to you is called Who is Your Customer? I'm Mike Hogan. I'm chairman of the marketing committee for CALLERLAB, a member of the board of governors for about a day now. And my pleasure to moderate this particular panel. I'd like to introduce to you our panelists, and then we'll kind of go through their stuff in order here. To my right is Eric Henerlau. Eric is from Corte Madera, California. Did I get that pretty close? Eric is also a member of the Board of Governors and is on the executive committee as well. And then to my left are Lee and Barbi Ashwill from Salem, Oregon. And they are your NEC reps. They were chairman of the, what was the number?
2005, 54th.
Of the 54th National Square Dance Convention in 2005. So we all have different aspects of what we're going to talk about with regard to who your customer is. And so we flipped the coin, and Eric, you're first. Everybody say hello to Eric Henerlau.
And we flipped the coin, and yes, I lost, so I get to go first. All right. Good afternoon. How are you all doing today? Are you awake? Well, let's see. Let me wait this up a little bit. So there was a handout down here. Make sure everybody got a copy of the handouts. So we have those there. I wanted to approach this session on who is your customer by talking about who your customer is when you're calling. And don't get ahead of me on the handout here, but I want to talk about that briefly. Every time we pick up the microphone to call, we're calling for a reason. We're calling to call to somebody out there. That somebody or something out there is our customer, right? Now, sometimes it's really obvious who our customer is. It could be our dancers right in front of us because they're the ones paying us to be there. They're the ones that expect us to be there. They're the ones that hired us at the club to be there. They're the ones who are actually getting up to form the square so that we can call and dance to them. So they must be our customer, right? I mean, that's how most of us kind of look at that. But then the other side of it is, who could be your customer? Could be the club that's hiring you. So maybe there's a conflict between the dancers on the floor and the club that's hiring you. Has that ever occurred to you? Has that ever happened to you? Anybody? So the club is hiring you to do, let's say the club is hiring you to do a plus dance. And you get out there, and what you have is a floor full of mainstream dancers that know some plus, but not all of it. Or maybe they know very little plus. And every time you call a plus call, half the floor or three-fourths of the floor breaks down. But the customer here was the club that hired you, right? They were the ones that said, you were booked to call a plus dance here tonight. Or another one might be, if you were booked to call a mainstream dance, but you got a lot of newer dancers who haven't finished mainstream class yet. You call that Dixie style, you call it spin chain through or spin the top and cloverleaf, and next thing you know, you drop the floor and you think, the club hired me to do a mainstream dance. I got a lot of people out here who can't do that dance. What do I do? Who is my customer? Who is the person whom I have to report to? Who am I calling for? These are questions we face as callers all the time. There aren't any right or wrong answers on this, so I want to emphasize that right now. At least from my standpoint, there are no right or wrong answers. The purpose of this session, to me, for my part of it, is for you to think about who your customer is when you pick up that microphone to call. To some people, they're going to say, I'm going to call to that floor to make sure that floor is successful because my reputation is on the line, who I am as a caller is on the line, and I want to make sure I entertain those dancers the best I can so when they walk out of the hall, they're going to say, Eric was a great caller, had a great time, I love this guy, I'll go back and see him again. To other people, they're going to say, I got booked by this club to do a mainstream dance or a plus dance. They're expecting that kind of dance. I'm going to deliver that because that is my professionalism. I'm going to do what they asked me to do. For those that can dance it, great. They'll be successful. Those that can't dance it, well, too bad. But maybe next year when I come back, they'll know the skills and they can be able to do this dance. Then I will satisfy the club's directive, which is to call the dance of the program that they asked me to. And with any luck, they will hire me back because that's what I was booked to do. But along that same line, you have to clarify with the club if what they ask you to do and what you can do are two different things on the floor. You need directive from the club. And if you're going to use the club as your customer, you have to ask them very specifically, do you want me to do what you asked me to do, or do you want me to adjust my program to what is really out there on the floor? In that case, your customer is the club because you're asking them to make the decision, right? If you just did what the floor can do, well, then your customer is the floor, right? So you're setting aside the club that's hiring you. Two distinct ways of looking who your customer is right there. Okay, those are pretty obvious and pretty straightforward. But there are other customers I always thought about that are kind of hidden customers. So I'm up here, I'm calling a dance. I'm rocking and rolling. I got 10 squares on the floor, right? And we're having a good time. Tony Oxendine walks in the room. How can that possibly be? And I think, oh, Tony's in the room, right? I better be on my A game. I'm going to do a really good job. I'm going to show some really cool choreography. I'm going to get out the best singing calls and belt them out and really look good, right? Maybe even starting to drop the floor, pushing it a little too fast, a little too hard, stuff the floor can't do. But I want to impress Tony, right? Right? So at that moment, who's my customer? Tony's my customer, right? I've lost the floor. I've lost the club that contracted with me. I'm calling for Tony. He doesn't know that. I put that in my head because I really want to impress Tony. Okay? So that moment, that became my customer. That person became my customer. Or somebody else walking in the hall. Really important for you to think about that the moment when you're calling, because every time we pick up the microphone to call, who are you delivering your product to? Who does it matter that you're delivering your product to? I thought of another customer, too, and this is sort of in the same line of another caller that walks in the room, but it's also kind of for yourself. There's some callers are very, very particular about their reputation. They say, I call this. This is what I call. This is what I stand for. This is how I call. I'm going to call this way because that's who I am. And for a lot of callers, that might be very esoteric, challenging, complex, creative choreography. And if that's who they're known for, and I've known callers like this over the years, they will always call that way, regardless of what the floor can do, regardless of what the club that booked them asked for. Because they are known for doing that kind of choreography, that kind of singing, that kind of relationship with the floor. They will do what they're going to do because that's who they are and what they're known for. And who is the customer at that point? Themselves, right? Their own ego. So look at that from that standpoint. At that point, I'm out here calling. I'm calling away like crazy because I'm going to call the really cool stuff that I'm really known for doing. The floor can't do it. The club's not really happy, but I'm calling what I'm doing because that's what Eric Henerlau does. That's how he calls, right? At that moment, the only customer I have is my own ego. And when I get off that floor, when I get off that dance and I'm done, I will have lost the group. I will have lost the club. But I'll satisfy my own ego and walked away and said, yeah, but I'm doing what I do. This is what I do. I can't tell you how many callers I run into all over the place that continually shoot themselves in the foot doing that because they believe they're so great at what they do in a certain way that they'll continue doing that, and they'll just blame the dancers for not being trained well enough, for not being taught well enough, for not dancing well enough, for not having the right attitude, for the clubs not putting together the right kind of dance. It's always the dancer's fault that they didn't survive what I called. So it's their fault. I take no responsibility. I do what I do because that's my reputation on the line, and I'm going to do it anyway. You either do it or you can't do it. It's your tough luck, right? I'm only feeding myself. I'm only calling for myself, not calling for anybody else at that point. So I give you 4 customers right there. Okay? The dancers, the club or organization that booked you, another caller that you're trying to impress, and your own ego. I put all this in the handout you have in front of you here. This is just food for thought. There's no right or wrong answer for this. This is really just to make you think about who you're calling for every time you pick up the microphone. Who are you calling for? And really what you want to accomplish. Can anyone think of any other customers they'd be calling for? Any other thoughts on this? Scratching your head? Okay, so think, yeah, Mike, take the microphone.
Yeah. Please, this is recorded, so please give us your name and talk on the microphone. Thank you.
Mike Gormley, Sebring, Florida. If I'm in an association dance or something like that, and there's all different clubs there, sometimes I'm looking to call or get bookings or whatever. So I'm trying to call to the bookmakers, maybe to get them to hire me. So they're kind of a customer when I'm there for that too. But
you calling for the other clubs? You want to say something?
Sharon Frank, St. Louis, Missouri. Other customer might be if you're doing a demonstration and you're trying to pick up new students for your lessons. Your customer is going to be the general public.
Okay. All right, that's what I had to say about who your customer is. And
I got a couple of questions,
you got a couple
Eric.
Go ahead.
So I guess I'm thinking of two of them. The first one is in your scenario where you've been booked to call a plus dance and you come in and about 20% of your floor can just barely get mainstream done. How do you manage that? How do you decide it's kind of a judgment thing at this point, I suspect, but I'm curious if you have some advice on what you think your decision ought to be on how to handle that situation.
Well, the first thing I'd ask is, who am I calling for? Am I calling for the dancers of the floor, or am I calling for the club to book me? It's a very clear question. So if I find that dancers really can't do this, what I'm doing, if I can adjust the program without anybody really noticing it to make it easier so people are more successful, I'll do that. If I have to really adjust the program significantly, I might go over and talk to the club. In fact, I might talk to the club anyway to find out kind of why the dancers are so weak. Do we have a class that's recently graduated? New dancers coming in. You might find that. They say, great, let me cater to the new dancers. And they probably will say yes, because they really like the new dancers. So I still would have a conversation with the club if you find out that the dancers really cannot do what you were programmed to do. I'd have a conversation with the president of the club and just kind of talk it out a little bit. Say, we have a lot of people here from whatever, so, you know, can we cater to those people? Is it okay? And they generally will say yes.
I love that answer. I personally think that the people that have to win are the dancers. Most of the time when we program a dance, we have, you know, a varying degree of difficulty. Somewhere in the dance there's a tougher tip somewhere, and it may be different on how you program dance from what I do. But somewhere in there I'm going to have a difficult tip. I don't care how accomplished or how new these dancers are. There's going to be a tip somewhere in the middle that's probably going to be the toughest tip of the night. And because it is, I'm probably going to lose a few more squares on that tip. But it would seem like, for the most part, I've got to look at what I believe the majority of the floor can handle, and I've got to call to them so that when they go home, not only will they remember Eric and want to come back and dance to Eric again, they'll also remember that they had a good time at that club that they came to visit, and they'll come to visit that club again as well. So that's kind of where I'm at, but it's essentially what you're saying, and I like that. The other thing would be, just when we talk about programming, you know, when Sharon brought up the idea that you're doing a beginner dance, or maybe you're calling for the Girl Scouts in their father-daughter banquet or something like that. In any of those cases, you have to give some forethought to who your customer is so that you program your dance appropriately. You may have brought some line dances or, you know, some other things besides typical square dance stuff for a beginner party. So you really have to have a good idea well before you walk in who you're calling for so you can program it.
Barbi Ashwill. I'm curious, just because of having heard at previous events we've attended where callers work very closely with the round dance cuers who were there that evening. So, in a sense, are they somewhat your customer also? Do you work back and forth so that you have the right rhythm, the right tempo, throughout the evening, so you build the dance up?
Oh, if I'm understanding, you're asking if the round dancers are also my customer, or the round dance cuer is my customer? The cuer. There are, we could probably do a whole session on caller-cuer relationships. I think that a cuer that's doing a good job is trying to follow the caller's lead. If the caller finishes a tip and he's got the crowd up, that's really not
Greg
a good
Anderson,
time
Colorado.
for
Is it true on XP, since you're not going to use it for the internet, you're not going to use it for email, because XP is no longer going to be supported in the fairly near future? That probably doesn't matter, I assume. You can have an old computer with XP if you're just using it for your music, and everything would work fine. Is that a true statement?
Somebody must be on the same frequency here that we are for the
Quick
tape.
show of hands. How many of you in the room have ever called Microsoft
is
for
bleeding
help on
over from
something?
another room. So,
okay, about a third of you. Okay, I see some thumbs down, right? The point is, if you're not going to call them anyway, it doesn't matter.
All right, good. Yeah, we'll just not use that one. Yeah, so, I think if the caller and cure are working well together, the caller or the cure is going to kind of follow the cure will follow the caller's lead. If I have them coming off of a really rowdy, rambunctious, finished-up singing call, I don't want them to come on and do a slow waltz. Likewise, if I've kind of brought them down, I really don't want them to come in and do a real fancy, jazzy cha. Although, frankly, I'd rather them follow me when I've done something very mellow and do something that's jazzy than go the other direction. It works a lot better if you have a cure that you've worked with a lot in your hometown. But I don't really think that the cure is your customer. I think your cure is your partner in this entertainment job that you have, and the better the relationship you have, the better you can follow each other. So that's my idea. Okay. All right, another comment?
Yes. Lee Ashwill, Salem, Oregon. And I really like what you said, Eric, about your customer out on the floor, because Barb and I graduated from mainstream lessons in 1978. 1979, we went to our first state festival with a national caller hired to do that. We had 48 squares on the floor, and he was not happy until he broke down 45 of the 48. Still calling today, and I will not dance that caller.
Yeah, that's too bad. Okay, and that's a judgment issue too, as well as, maybe not so much who he's calling for or who his customer is. Okay, so moving along then. Anybody else have another question for Eric on the topics at this point? Okay, then Lee and Barbi Ashwill have some new kind of twists to what we've done so far with Eric. So please welcome Lee and Barbi Ashwill.
Thank you very much, Leah. We came at this from a different angle when they asked us, because we're not callers. And so we were looking at who is your customer in recruiting people into our activity, and came up with a few ideas. One of them that we came up with is we're looking at people who are looking for a new experience, something they've not had any introduction to at all. And we've asked every friend we had to join us in our square dance activity, and it seems like today all of our friends are square dancers, and we've run out of contact. So we've got to find another way to get those folks that we're looking for. We're also looking for someone who is looking for a health benefit, and our activity, in our opinion, is very health related, and I think the doctors are now starting to put out articles saying that our activity is very much health generating.
Barbi Ashwill. I would just add to that my own personal experience with my doctor, in that he said, okay, it's that time in your life, hit the treadmill. I said, all right, are we talking every day or every other day? And he said, well, you square dance, right? And I said, yes. He said, every day you don't square dance. I want you on the treadmill. So I don't know how many other people are telling you that. I also know we had an opportunity to talk with a caller while we were waiting in Fort Worth, Denver on our way, or Fort Worth, Dallas on our way over here. And he was saying that he had experienced with a pedometer that those dancers who think they are taking so many steps, walking so many miles, and a lot of dancers track this. If you don't know that, stop and talk to them sometime. It's really interesting. Anyway, that they lost about 400 steps per tip. So that just gives you, pardon? Lost. They lost it if they did not promenade all the way. I'm sorry, I didn't finish my sentence. If they cut the promenade short, they lost 400 steps each tip. So you figure how many tips you do a night. You're really fooling yourself if you think you're getting all that exercise. Yes. One of the things I've been advocating for a long time, seeing what's happening with the dancing audience in our area, is that I think we need to be gearing our activity more towards the single dancer. We tend in our world to make everything a couple's activity. And we all know or have experienced, either personally or through very close friends and family, that there are deaths in the family, there are divorces, there are those people maybe who have chosen careers over a very close relationship and getting married. So they are single people. If this activity would lean towards what they call the bell bow or the right-hand dancer, left-hand dancer concept, it would seem to me that it wouldn't be without problems, but I think it would be doable and would perhaps bring more dancers into our activity and keep more dancers in our activity. I think the first thing that really hit home with me on this was last year at CALLERLAB when one of the Japanese callers handed me a brochure. And on the front of that brochure, 8.5 by 11, the whole page was taken up with, I don't know, it looked like 100 or 200 squares to me of dancers. They were all women. And, you know, are we looking at the activity from a dating point of view, if you will, or are we looking at it from a sociable and activity for, you know, good mental health, good physical health? I just think that we need to relook this. I think you could do away with some of the moves like twirls and yellow rocks, yes, type of movements, and just make it more generic, but so that everybody could get out there and enjoy this activity and have the fun that we know can be had.
Lee Ashwill again, and I attended a session this morning that really got my brain matter thinking, and I'm going to go home and try this, and it was advertising introduction to square dance for 6 weeks. And I'm going to try to convince our club to do that and pay for the lessons. So there are free lessons for those folks coming out to be introduced to square dancing. Then after that, you go to 2 8-week sessions to finish the mainstream program. Hopefully, by the time they finish that 6th week, they'll be so enthralled with our activity that they will continue on.
Thank you. Any questions for the Ashwills? Comments? Okay. Very good. Okay, so I, being a marketer by my vocation, I guess this calling is my vocation as well, but I don't make a whole lot of money doing this. At any rate, so I got what both of these folks wanted to talk about, and I kind of blended the two. If we are going to talk about who our customer is, I'm going to show you who it is and who I think we want it to be, and then talk just a little bit about how we would come up with some of that stuff. Like, I want to quote something to you first. This is from the StarWorks research that was done in early 2000-something, 2001, somewhere in 2002, the focus group research stuff. So this was, the target group was baby boomers, empty nesters, folks whose kids had just left for college, that kind of a category of people. So they were not square dancers, and they were asked about what their vision, what they believe square dancers to be, who they are, what their lifestyle is, that type of thing. So this is, if you've heard before that perception is reality, you should hear what they said. So I'm going to read it to you. Square dancing has an image problem in the general public, particularly among those in the targeted empty nester baby boomer age group. This target population sees square dancing as out of date, country-oriented, for hicks and hillbillies, using old-fashioned music, and patronized by senior citizens in fluffy dresses with big hair, big belts, and RVs. Most people say they are familiar with square dancing, but their familiarity with it is with traditional square dancing, is with traditional square dancing, not with modern Western square dancing. As a result, their image of square dancing is strongly influenced by the traditional square dancing and does not reflect the realities of modern Western dance. So that's a direct quote from StarWorks. Now, there's some pieces in here that I wanted to ask you about. When it says that they see us as out of date, do you see us as out of date? You don't? I don't know. We play a lot of old stuff. We play a lot of new music. But I think if you took all of the callers around the country and you analyzed all of the music that they use, we're out of date. I think the callers you see represented at CALLERLAB are staying in tune with a little bit with modernizing all the things that we're doing, so you're going to see a natural amount of more current. Oh, this is going to die on me, maybe. That's okay. I won't need it after this anyway. Okay, so there you go. Are we country-oriented? And I'm not sure what that meant. Does country-oriented mean we like country music? Or does country-oriented mean we live on a farm? I'm not sure what that means. I do know what Hicks and Hillbilly means. And I don't believe that we are all Hicks and Hillbillies. I do believe we have some folks that are dancers that are Hicks and Hillbillies. But I certainly don't believe that that's the norm. And I'm a little hillbilly myself now and then, so I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. But clearly in the way that they said it, their impression is y'all are hillbillies. Okay. Do we use old-fashioned music? Sometimes. We know that we have a lot of new stuff. But I think if you could analyze the music that all the callers use, we probably use more old-fashioned music than we use new stuff. Okay? Are we, where was I at? And patronized by senior citizens.
Well, that's actually pretty true.
Y'all agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. In fluffy dresses with big hair, big belts, and RVs. So that's their image of who we are. And we also know from research that most of the folks who have at least have been asked about square dancing have said that they don't think square dancing is a bad thing. They don't think it is a negative. They don't think of it as, like you might think of rap music or a teen dance with mosh pits. Is that what they call them? Where you pass somebody around and anyway. So they don't think of it as bad stuff. What they don't see, though, is they don't see themselves when they describe a square dancer. So if they can't see themselves when they describe a square dancer, they're not going to participate because they can't see themselves participating in the activity. So now I'm going to tell you who our customer is. Here's who our customer is. And this is not stuff Mike pulled out of his hat. I have some other stuff later that I pulled out of my hat. But this I did not pull out of my hat. Now, if I can just find my glasses. There are actually two demographic research pieces that have been done. One was done by CALLERLAB, and I can't find it. I went to our website, and I went through the search thing, and I found the press release thing that there was a demographic research, a pretty big survey that was done, and the only thing on our website was we did some research. But the research itself isn't there. So I went to the arts website, and I knew the arts had done this as well. So the numbers that I've shown you all come primarily from the 2004 and 2005 Nationals, 2004 in Denver and 2005 in Portland, the National that the Ashwills were chairman of. And then there were a few other groups which I didn't bother to print the last couple of pages because the bulk of the numbers came from those two nationals. So this is skewed a little bit because these are the folks that came to our national convention, not necessarily the people that are at your home club. And also bear in mind that these stats are roughly 8-9 years old. Okay? So here's the highlights. 8 to 9 years ago, 43% of our dancers were between 60 and 70. Almost 19% were over the age of 70. Age those folks by 8 years. Okay? We were just slightly more female than male. The stats show 49%, 43%, and then 6.5% that didn't tell us. So, yeah, we're slightly more female than male. We are about 75% are married. So 75% of our dancers said they're part of a couple. and the other 25% said they were single or divorced or widowed. Okay? Their 70% had been dancing 10 years or longer, and 36% had been dancing over 20 years. So we don't have a lot of new folks. 13% were in the 6 to 10 years, and there was only about 15% total that had danced less than, or 5 years or less. So we've been dancing a long time. That should tell us something about our success in recruiting. There's a lot of things. I'm not going to go through the income and education stuff. We do know that their secondary dance is primarily is round dancing, then other, and then line dancing. In terms of what they dance, by far the highest level, or most participated in level, would be plus. Actually, at the Nationals, followed by advanced and then by mainstream. So plus is the predominant destination right now for people to, when they finish their classes. On you go, distance traveled, all that stuff was relevant to them getting to that particular convention, and that doesn't tell us much about our overall customer. But I'm going to come back and talk about music. Because now we know that we're talking about a listening audience or a dancing audience that is in their 60s and 70s, and we know that they like, first and foremost, they like classic country music. By the way, if you look at the percentages, they got to vote for more than one style of music, okay? So 60% of them like classic country, 44% like modern country, 47%, a bigger percent like easy listening music than modern country music. New age was 6.3 and rap was 1.6%. So, we definitely know the kind of music that our current customer, remember we're talking about our current customer, what they like. Then you can move on along. You can go live in areas. That thing said that we are country oriented, which I actually presume meant they thought that this was done, and it did say in some other verbiage that they thought it was primarily done in rural areas, not in big cities where there's so many other entertainment options. I didn't read you that quote, but I can if you wanted. That had to do more with the awareness. When in actuality, at least from our nationals conventions, 34% were suburban. Next was 27%, which were urban. And then 19% said they lived in the country, and 14% said rural. I'm not sure the difference between living in the country and being rural, but the point would be we're actually more of our dancers are coming from populated areas than from urban or from rural areas. Does that make sense? So some of that research is wrong. What I try to do when I look at all this stuff is I try to figure out, okay, who is our customer? So now you can go to the chart, so the first page that says who's your customer. When you graph this thing out and you age those people some, what you find out is that today 63% of our square dance population is over the age of 70.
And that was 8 or 9 years ago?
No, this is adding some age into what the research was, right? Okay. So 63%, and I took out the ones, by the way, as I figured some of these factors, I took out the percentages of people that didn't tell us their age. I just took who did and recalculated the percentages of the total respondents that actually gave us an answer, because that's about the only fair way to come up with it. 63% are over the age of 70, and 26% are between 60 and 69. Therefore, 89% of our dancers are over the age of 60. And, of course, the next highest at 7% was 50 to 59 and so forth. So we definitely are an old group of people. Love y'all to death, by the way. I don't mean anything bad by that. It's just how much longer is the 63% of our dancers that are over the age of 70, how many more years will they dance? So that's a big problem staring us in the face. Right now we're 53% female, 47% male. 77% actually is what it came out to, married, and 23% single. And then there's the music. And I use music. The reason I use music is because in my real world I work in the radio industry. So I have lots of research available about music. That's hard and true. So I looked at this and I said, okay, so we know that if you just took all of those respondents and you took if somebody checked 3 different types of music, each one of those counted. So then when you recalculate the percentages to get how much on each category, classic country is the most popular at 20%, followed by easy listening, followed by modern country, oldies, show tunes, classical, and gospel. So our current dancing population, for the most part, you could say doesn't like rock music, does not like jazz music, does not like new age, does not like rap. You'd probably say, yeah, I didn't need a whole lot of research to tell me that, right? So then what I did with that is I said, okay, so now who do we want our customer to be? And so if you do that, here was my math, because I have to make some assumptions when I do this. You can change some of my assumptions, and it'll change these graphs a little bit, but not dramatically. Here's what I did. I said, okay, of all of those dancers that responded, I'm just going to guess, because I don't know the actual population of square dancers in the United States. Anybody happen to know that number? I guessed 100,000. Anybody think that's just way off? I think that's probably pretty close. It's an average of 2,000 dancers per state. Clearly, California and Texas are going to have more. Arizona's going to have more. Nebraska certainly has a lot less. So does Iowa. So on the whole, I said 100,000. And then and then you can just do a math thing. And what my goal was to say, all right, if we want to successfully recruit new people in to the activity, we got to figure out who we got to go after. So I said, let's take the 63,000 that are 70 years or older, and instead of making that 63,000 63%, let's make that number only 20% of our dancer population. So 63,000 times 5 becomes our new base of dancers. Does that make sense? Okay? So the next 20%, I said, we'd love it if the next 20% were in that 60 to 70 category. And then the next 20% were 50 to 60. And then realistically, probably as we get younger, we're not going to get quite as big a percentages. So in my head, I said, so let's say that we want 15% to be 40 to 50, and 15% to be 30 to 40, 5% to be 18 to 29, and 5% to be teenagers or younger. If you do that math and you use a base, which actually ended up being 310,000 dancers, I can correlate that to what we have today and come up with exactly how many in each 10-year age group we have to recruit. Does that make sense? It's a math thing, which I'm a math freak. We do not need to recruit any 70-year-olds. We need to successfully recruit and retain 36,500 60 to 70-year-olds, 54,500 50 to 60s, yada, yada, yada. You can see the numbers. For the tape, since some of you won't get the handout, it's 15,000 teenagers, 13,500 18 to 29, 45,500 in their 30s, 45,000 in their 40s, 54,500 in their 50s, and 36,500 in their 60s. When you look at that, you can very clearly see that our biggest challenge is going to be 30 to 60-year-olds. That's who we need to recruit. If my numbers that I made assumptions are in the first pie chart of 20% in each of those first 4 categories, 15, 15, 5, and 5. If you change those percentages, then your total number that you have to recruit will change. But I think our best success is going to be probably with folks who are willing, for the most part, to dance with at least some of the younger generation of our current dancer base. So we're still probably talking empty nester baby boomers, people in their mid to late 40s all the way up to about 60 years old, that category. But based on that math that I did, I said it's got to be 30 to 60 years old. That's who we have to go after. We do not need to go after 60 to 70-year-olds, because while we're doing this project, our 50 to 60s are going to age. They're going to become the 60 to 70-year-olds. We got to go on the low end and go to 30s to 60s. Then, the other 2 things are somewhat assumptions that I've made, but I've made them based on a lot of the history that I have in working with customers in the regular day-to-day business world and what they're seeing in terms of trends of decision-making, shopping, those kinds of things, today, I don't know the exact percentage, but right now today, if you took the composition of folks that are single versus folks that are married, we have the highest population of single people that we have ever had in the country as a whole. Not talking square dancing, in the country as a whole. So logic says we're going to have more singles getting involved in square dancing. The other element is the woman is making more and more and more and more decisions and is much more independent than ever before. So as we know, it's virtually impossible to get a guy unless you can get his gal and then she drags him kicking and screaming. Bottom line is we should probably expect that we're going to have more women coming into our activity than we have men. So if you do that math, and we end up with 60% female and 40% male as opposed to right now it was like 50, what was it the previous page, 53-47. We need to recruit 133,000 women and 77,000 men. Right on the nose.
Let's get going.
Okay? And then in the marital status element of this thing, again, because there's more women or there's more singles, okay, we're now looking at moving to, instead of 72% couples, to probably 65% couples. That may be 60%. It may be 50% of our dancers are couples. I don't know for sure where that's going to go. But if my number at 65-35 is right, we need to recruit 85,680 singles and 62,160 couples, which is 124,000 people because they're a couple, right?
Right.
So there's your math. So what it tells us, what it should tell us at CALLERLAB about our product is that our product needs to be more conducive for a woman to come and take lessons and be successful and for a single to come and take lessons and be successful. We know that, and we know that our target audience needs to be 30 to 60 years old. It doesn't, unless you want to change these and come up with a marketing plan that just goes after kids, then that skews this. But on the averages, that's where our target needs to be. Now, the last thing that I want to tell you about is music. How am I doing for time? Oh, I got plenty of time. Okay. So then the other thing, because I work in the radio industry, I said, okay. Unfortunately, the folks that do this, the music research, which is Arbitron, they're the folks that do all the ratings for radio stations. They don't cut it at 50 and 60 and 40 and 30, and they cut it on the fives. So you got 25 to 35, 35 to 45, yada, yada, yada. So I took just 25 to 64-year-old. That's a broad range. That's two generations. Okay. So I took that vast 40-year cell of 25 to 64-year-olds, and I just looked at, in the Omaha market, all of the stations and the music formats that they play. And if you combine all of the folks between the age of 25 and 64 into one pool of people, and then you rank it based on the radio stations, I can tell you to the exact percent what stations, what music genres are the most popular with that age group. The top category is CHR. CHR, that's radio term that stands for Contemporary Hit Radio, which basically is today's top 40. It's today's pop music. It is, and the last page, by the way, if you want to refer to it once in a while as we do this, are examples of artists that you would find. Lady Gaga, Pink. I have two Pinks on there. Why do I have two Pinks? I must have been getting tired when I did this. Maroon 5. Y'all know those people? Okay. Do we do much of their music?
Yeah, we do some.
We're doing some. We're doing some. But my message to callers here at CALLERLAB and callers that aren't here at CALLERLAB and callers, again, if we could go back and analyze what all of the callers around the country are using, most of them are not using this type of music. So we're on track with some of the music that some of the music producers are cutting today. That one's going to be a stretch. It's going to be real hard for me to tell a 75-year-old caller that he's got to call to Pink. But that's what it is. Okay? The second most popular format is super hits. Super hits is 60s, 70s, 80s based pop music. We have a lot of that right now, and it's the second most popular form of music with that group. Now, it's a 40-year-old age group that I picked. you can bet the CHR is popular with the young half of that 40-year cell, and the super hits is popular with the top half of that 40-year cell, right? So, and I can dial it down. I can dial it down for your market. I can dial it down for the country. I just used Omaha's ratings because that's what I had instant access to. But you can find that kind of information out very quickly. And that's if we want to be able to offer a product that has the features and benefits that our prospective, who we want to be our customer, wants. They can see themselves they might not see themselves square dancing, but they can see themselves dancing to music from Maroon 5 and Pink. Right. If we could convince them that square dancing uses that kind of music, then maybe they'd go, well, that's not old-fashioned. That's all new stuff. And we've started to change the perception. Modern country is 14%. AC is 14%. By the way, some of these, like CHR and AC, they kind of cross over. You can have some of the same on those different formats. AC is adult contemporary. So some of the examples of that are, where's my AC list? Modern adult contemporary, Mumford & Sons, John Mayer, Bruno Mars, Train, Adele, some of those types of artists. And we do have some music, especially some of the pop or some of the pattern music that we're using today. A lot of the more progressive callers are getting stuff right off of Amazon, and they're using their computers and magically transforming it into amazing pattern music.
So we're seeing calls by Train and Adele already.
We have singing calls by Train and Adele already. So we're on the right track. We need more callers to be buying and using that type of music, and we need to somehow let the rest of the world that we actually use that stuff. So that's an example of how you do research to determine the features and benefits that your prospective customer is looking for. When it comes to a marketing standpoint, marketing is product, it's placement or distribution, it's promotions, it's price. There's the 4 P's and the D's, so I'm doing the 4 P's and the D here. It's price. What do we charge? Are we competitive? There's merchandising aspects to it. Merchandising, the best I could tell you for merchandising is they don't want to dance in the church basement. Because it's a church basement. That's why. Their attitude would be, no, I want to go to a really cool place to dance. Now, they're probably not thinking lots of lights on. They're probably thinking lights are down and everybody's, it's decorated. I'll tell you what, if you do a good job of decorating, there's only so much that we can do. We don't have the money to dance in huge ballrooms and that kind of stuff. But at least clubs could take a look at that and do a better job of taking the stuff on the stage, because the stage is usually a storage room, and moving it off the stage or pulling the curtain and doing things to make that look better. So there's all kinds of things that we can do where we could research what the 30 to 60-year-olds' habits are, what things they like. And the last thing, I picked this up from this morning when we were talking about the possibility of a new entry-level program. Do we really know that we need to have a new entry-level program that takes less time to learn? Do we really know that? Do we have research where these prospective people have said to us, I won't take a class for 10 years. Now, I'm sure that we're right about that they're not going to take 20 weeks of lessons or 30 weeks of lessons. If you tell them up front, they're going to go, no. But we also know that if we recruit somebody, we want them to come in, and very soon after they get there, they have to love this activity and feel like it's where they belong. And if they do, then they'll suddenly get on the Rush to Plus lessons program, and they'll be in lessons for 2 years anyway. But there should be a shorter window before the time they hit the door before we say, congratulations, you have successfully accomplished something, and you can now go dancing at other clubs. So what I wrote was that we need to determine how many classes. We pick 12. One of the studies one of the projects that's being worked on that I'm aware of right now is 12 weeks. Okay? Well, that's better than 20. It's better than 30. It's better than a year. And, of course, you'd have to figure out what calls and those kinds of things. But is 12 the right number? The way you find out is you get focus groups of 30 to 60-year-olds, and you find out from then. If it was fun for you to do, and you got involved, and it was music that you liked, and you could wear whatever you wanted to wear, and all of those kinds of things, how many classes, how many nights of class would you be comfortable with before you felt like you've accomplished it and can now go and dance? We could do that research with focus groups. So what I said was we need to determine how many classes our target market would be willing to take before feeling that they've learned to dance. Having that sense of accomplishment, I've made it. Is it 5? Is it 12? We don't know, but we know how to do the research to find the answers. We know about the music that they like. There's all kinds of stats about this stuff. We may even be able to go online without doing a focus group and figure the answer to how many lessons they'll take. It's probably out there on this internet somewhere. So that's a combination then of who our customer currently is and who I think we want it to be, and some basic background on if that's who we want it to be. We know the age group now that we need to recruit, and at least we know their music tendencies so that we can make sure that our product is being modified to better fit them. Okay, that's my part. Questions? Comments? All right. Here comes Mr. Riggs. Yeah, see if that'll Is it good now? All right.
Bob Riggs, Colorado. The numbers match what I'm finding. I don't do the research, but I have a class of 30 students with one couple over 60, and the rest are younger. And I do use the music, and so I am seeing, and they like the music, and so I think as a mini focus group without any stuff here, I can say, yeah, I agree. Without any of this matches the statistics. I'm the one with 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and 8 weeks. So that's me. Now, number one, sort of another commentary. This age group doesn't mind spending money for value. I give nothing away free. I charge $7 a lesson on average, but I charge it in blocks. So I don't think that the issue is money. I think it's an issue of value. And if you're delivering value, people are willing to pay for it. Sometimes giving something away actually degrades the value. And so I think that there's an issue that we've, especially in the square dance community, they say, well, I want to give away free because I want to get more people. Actually, I found the contrary. I found that if I give it away free, it is not bought. If I give it away with value, I get buyers. And I don't know in the marketing world how that fits into, yeah. So that was a comment that I wanted to make is that, and I'm the one who says, I tell people it's $10 a class, and if you pay me up front, I'll give you a 30% discount. So it's $10 a class that gets down to $7 if they pay me all at once. So I'm using some marketing kind of discounting kind of thing to get there, just as a sub note. And let's see, the last thing I was thinking of is I believe that there's a market for what we have, and I'm headed toward a basic world, maybe a soft basic world, as a target, as a first destination. There will be some people, because of frequency of involvement, that want to go on to what we call square dancing today. But I think there'll be a whole group of people that both move through and back through this thing we call basic. So that was the other comment.
Thank you, Bob. That's a great comment. And actually, when Bob was referring to pricing, I mentioned earlier the 4 P's and the D. Okay, well, one of the things in your marketing strategy is pricing. What do you price at? I think we do have a pricing issue. Now, this is Mike Hogan opinion for the record. This is not, not what CALLERLAB says or anything like that. Here's what our pricing problem is. Our dancers are our customers. Who's your customer? Our dancers are our customers. And they are also the ones running our business. So they are in the world of, I'm going to have a club and I'm going to charge our members $6 a couple to get in, and that's the price that I'm going to set. I've talked to a number of people that are very unfamiliar with square dancing, and I just said, if you could go to an event where you could dance for 2.5 hours and they provided food, not fancy food, but food for you to eat and drink, and you could have a good time doing that, how much do you think something like that might cost? And I've heard anything from $20 a piece to $100. Okay? And I'm not suggesting that we try to charge $40 a couple for a dance or $20 a head for a dance, but we ought to be getting closer to that number. And if we were, then we would be able to pay for nicer halls. Callers could actually make a little money. There'd be enough left that clubs would have some money. Maybe they'd have enough money that they could set up their own marketing budget, a variety of those kinds of things, if we just could accomplish that piece. Because right now, while we don't give it away, we are definitely undercharging our current customer for the value that they're receiving. And the reason that's happening is because the customer is in charge of our business right now. That would be like me going to my favorite Buick dealer and telling him I'm going to buy the new Buick Lucerne that's $38,000 to $45,000, but I'm going to pay him $12,000 for it. And I get to do that because I'm in charge. So that's an issue. Don't give away your lessons. If you want to, hey, the first night I'm not going to charge you anything if you don't want to take the class. Maybe you could do something like that. But if you told them that it's $10 per person per night, they'd go, okay, that sounds about right. And if you told them it was $15 per person per night, I would guess that most of them would probably go, okay, I guess that's right, because they really don't know what it costs. So don't give it away, okay? That's pricing. And by the way, the example that Bob gave of, I charge $10 per night, but if you pay me up front, I'll give you a 30% discount. That's pricing strategy. All day long businesses use that kind of stuff. Why don't we use it in square dancing? We should use that kind of stuff. It's a great idea in my opinion. Sharon, you had a question? Please come up. Guys, I'm sorry that you have to come up and use the mic, but the portable is dead. So,
Sharon Frank, St. Louis. If you went to the community center and you wanted to take one of their classes or exercise classes or something like that, you're committed to 6 to 8 weeks, and they're going to charge you about $45 to take those classes. So, why can't we do kind of the same thing?
Yeah, it's $9 a night. Yeah. And you're committed. Anybody else? Either comments or questions, doesn't matter. We'd just love to hear what you guys are thinking. Susan?
Susan Morris from the Seattle area. Several comments to follow up on Sharon. I taught a class for a club that went through the local parks department, and they did 2 10-week sessions. They were $50 each session, so $100 for 20 lessons. And everything else on that page was $45 or $50 for 4 lessons. Yep. Drastically underpriced, but could never ooch that up. I was involved in independent schools on the Board of Trustees for a long time, and who is your customer is very similar to schools. Is your customer the student, or is your customer the parent? And sometimes it's one, and sometimes it's the other. Yep. And it's totally equal. Let's see, I had one more. The other thing that I think we don't think about too much in the statistics you had. Most of the dancers had danced for a number of years, and those are what I would consider hobby dancers. We dance 3, 4, 7 nights a week. Callers do the same thing. And a lot of the newer dancers that I think we are trying to recruit in that 30 to 60 range that are still working full-time, might have kids, have other family, are going to be more recreational dancers. And some of our programs are not really geared to recreational dancers that need to move in and out as their lives allow them to, which I think Bob's, wherever Bob is, a basic program that people can move in or out as their lives allow is going to be better for getting our numbers up.
Thank you. Yeah. When it comes to how long, let's take price and how long the entry-level program ought to be. There's a correlation there, because if we want to charge, let's say we want to charge $20 a couple. Well, for the most part, people will pay $100 to learn to do something. They will. $100 a couple to learn to do something? You betcha. Probably got it in their billfold. Okay? But if we're going to charge $20 a night and it's 30 lessons, they're not going to pay $600 to take a class, and they don't even know if they're going to like it. There's no possible way. So for us to be able to charge an adequate value, we have to have a short entry program, because they're not going to, they'll pay $20 a night if it's 5 weeks, but they're not going to pay $20 a night if they're making a commitment to 30 weeks. It's just not going to happen. So if we're going to ask them for 30 weeks, we're probably going to have to ask them for $4 or $5 a night, because that's all they're going to pay. And you're going to have to break it up and let them pay it in little chunks at a time, because they're not going to write you a check for $600. Anybody else? Brian?
Brian Jarvis, Washington, D.C. Mike, I love the numbers, and I'm a big fan of math. Good stuff. Unfortunately, there's only 20 people in the room. How do we enforce this knowledge into the brains of the people that really need to have this, to know where they should be hunting for their new recruits?
I can respond to that. So the numbers. Mike is a marketing professional, as you know. That's what he does for his job. He's also a statistician, and he knows about music, and he's got numbers here to back all that up. Mike is on the board of governors, and part of what's going to be happening, starting actually tomorrow with the board of governors, is a shift in our direction and what we're going to be doing with any luck at all. And we're going to be really a lot more focused on marketing. So as Mike was going through this, I think he's going to be making the exact same presentation tomorrow to the whole Board of Governors. And we're going to be talking about this. You don't know this yet, Mike, but we're going to be talking about this. So we're going to be talking about this as well tomorrow at the BOG level, and then see how it's going to go out from that point out to everybody else. Okay? So, yes, it's very important.
So what I said about research is whether we actually do, I think we do some type of formal decision-making on who our target audience is going to be. And if CALLERLAB says this is who our target will be, then we can do the research just to say, okay, if that's who it is, what do they want? And we can validate that through solid research that is either already available for us or that we paid to have done. Whichever way it works out, we can validate the exact information. So then if we get to that point, it's got CALLERLAB's stamp on it. Look, we've done the homework. This is what we have to do. We've decided it. Now, what are we going to do? Well, I'm sure I'll probably get to have some input or suggestions on some of that as well. We're going to need, by the way, if we were charging $20 a couple, we might have some system to be raise funds to do some of this marketing, because I know the foundation has some money. I know that national conventions sometimes have some money left over for educational type things and so forth. But we are going to have to get refocused on fundraising so that we can generate enough money to do something, as well as develop a lot of no cost, lots of effort, but not lots of cost things. I have another stat for you. I made this up, but I think it's pretty darn accurate. You guys know the 80-20 rule? 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people, etc. Okay? Yeah, I believe that when it comes to this particular topic, we have an 80-17-3 rule. And that is this. I firmly believe this to be accurate. It may be 75, it may be 81, but essentially 80% of the people that are involved in square dancing right now could care less if square dancing exists one day after they quit dancing. That's a pretty bold statement, but I believe that to be true. I believe of the 20% that's left, there's 20% that actually love square dancing enough that they want it to continue. They want square dancing to go on. And of that, only 3% are actually willing to come to meetings like this and get on committees and actually do the background hard work of putting the whole plan together. So what will happen is, an example would be if we do, and I'm doing some of this in Omaha. I know these stats are exactly right in Omaha. Okay? I started this group called Square Dance Omaha, and we're doing things like we're doing parades again. Okay, we're going to be in like 7 or 8 parades, trying to increase the awareness of the activity in our market. So what happens is you have 100 dancers, you have 20 that come and dance at every parade, and you have 3 that put the parade together and build the float and do all of that stuff. And I'm telling you, that's the exact same thing that we have going on, not just at our country, around our country. Honest to God, I think that to some extent we have that going on right here at CALLERLAB. And believe me, I would love to be proven wrong. But I had a committee meeting. We had 3 sessions this week that were marketing issues. One was the new thing that the Nest is doing with their new dance program. We had 70 or so people that came to that. A lot of interest in hearing about that. So people are looking for the answer. They're not looking to be the answer. Because only 10 people came to the marketing committee, and only 12 people came to this session. So thank you for being the part of the 3. All right? Anybody else? Bob?
And just a note, my daughters all learned how to square dance, but at this time none of them are. But my middle daughter is involved in West Coast Swing, and she's doing competitive West Coast Swing. She's paying $50 for 45 minutes of a lesson. Yep. That's realistic in the swing world, and it's also the ballroom world is in that same vicinity. So again, that's a cost comparison factor. Yep. That was the first thing that came to mind. All of this discussion just leads me down the path of saying, I have a cautionary note. I have taught the mainstream list, the 68 calls in the mainstream list, in a weekend and in 45 weeks. What's the difference between the groups I taught? Age. If we, in fact, lower the age of our customer into the 30-40 range, we have a darn good program in the mainstream program that we can because we can teach it faster and we can get there faster. So I caution people about cutting the program to suit the age that we have. We need to make sure that the program and the age of our customer have somewhat of a match.
I think that's a wonderful point. Thank you, Bob. Anybody else? Susan, one more? Please.
Okay, this is Susan Morris from Washington State. When I started calling was when we were doing all the marketing things at the beginning of the 2000s and all the focus groups and all that information that I think some of your statistics came from. And really nothing ever came of it, or nothing happened after that. So I would hope that we don't spend lots of money and lots of years doing more focus groups to have nothing come of it.
Very, very good point. And I think that's some of the stuff that Eric's talking about. CALLERLAB Board of Governors, some of the Board of Governors met with Denise Ryan. they did a kind of a new look at what our mission is moving forward, kind of like a 10 to 20 year projection. And I do think that coming out of that will be a entirely new kind of focus on, not as much on, not that we wouldn't stay focused on caller training and a lot of the things that CALLERLAB's been about, but a whole new emphasis on really focusing efforts to try and grow the activity again, because otherwise we won't have anybody to call for. So, all right, would you please give Eric and Barbi and Lee Ashwill a nice hand? Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for coming to the session. We will break for dinner. Have a good day. Thank you, guys.